what I think anybody who goes out into the world today can see pretty clearly is that our decisions are now biased towards instant gratification. We need that food right away. We need that purchase online right away. We need the social approval right away. And this is an issue because for the most part, those short-term instant gratification type decisions are leading us to making poor choices. They're leading us to making the decisions that lead to chronic disease and unfortunately also depression, anxiety, and chronic stress. And over time, due to neuroplasticity, our brains rewire in such a way that it reinforces these types of decisions. So our brains increasingly rely on these quick fixes, and it puts us into a cycle where we lead to the things that are so problematic. As I just said, bad mood, anxiety, stress disorders, as well as things like obesity and diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So what we're really talking about here at the core of all of it is our brains are amazing, but they're not necessarily any different than they were thousands of years ago. And so what's great about our brains is they're flexible. They react to the environment, they learn, they change, they're plastic. But when the influences on our brains by, let's say, a marketing firm, or let's say an unhealthy food that's at every street corner, are pushing it in a certain direction, we wind up feeling that. We wind up experiencing those consequences. And those consequences are the things we have problems with today. It's the health and mental health problems that are so rampant in the modern world.
And this is you're also speaking to the amygdala, right? We're overstimulating the amygdala through all these mechanisms.
Yeah, so the two regions of the brain we want to draw attention to, and obviously neuroscience is a lot more complicated than this, are the prefrontal cortex, which I just described, and then the limbic system. And the limbic system has a bunch of components, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, but also the amygdala. And the amygdala is, I don't want to oversimplify it, but the amygdala is strongly involved in the stress response. It is one of the central components of that fight or flight response. When you see something scary, let's say it's a snake or a spider or a saber-toothed cat, depending on who you are, that's going to activate the amygdala, which shoots out through the sympathetic nervous system and the HPA axis, the stress hormones, cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and increases your heart rate, increases your blood pressure, which is great in the short run if you're trying to escape from a threat. But in the long run, we know that this type of chronic stress, again, mediated by the amygdala, is going to increase your odds for a variety of health conditions, most conclusively, I would say, in the realm of mental health and anxiety. And so what you see is people with anxiety pretty consistently have increased activation of the amygdala. And what you see in people who try to do things, interventions to kind of calm the amygdala, things like meditation or nature exposure or even sleep, is that you have decreased activation of the amygdala, and that correlates with more of reflective thinking and less anxiety. So it's kind of a complicated description here, but what we're talking about is there are regions in the brain where activation correlates with things like anxiety and poor decision making. And our goal should be to say, look, what things can we do to improve our quality of life, and how do they relate to various activation patterns in the brain? Generally speaking, what we want is more prefrontal activation and decreased amygdala activation.